resources to collect this data. So we need to be in a position where we can interact better with our supply chains, utilising technology, capturing social, environmental, financial and service delivery data, so that the good work of our suppliers can be reported each year. It's not just the council. In terms of what we need to do next, we'll obviously need to approve the procurement strategy at council. We need to have due regard to the key components within the strategy, which are people, processes, technology, information and culture, which are all vital to the delivery of the strategy. We'll be required to approve a new set of procurement rules, which I'm working on at the moment, because there are some changes as a result of the legislation that need to come through. And we'll obviously need to invest in systems to improve our contract management processes, because we need to report on procurement outcomes each year as part of the Social Procurement Act. And we need improved data handling, and obviously we need effective governance of procurement to be re-established, but in a way that does not impede the progress of the wider strategy. And we will be developing and delivering a new commercial strategy within probably the next 6 months as well. That's basically the report in a snapshot. Chair.
Okay, thanks, Paul. I'd like to open up the questions. Councillor Clive Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Can we start first of all, Chair, with the cost, that 40 million cost? So what steps are being taken to try to reduce that?
The 40 million in terms of
you're looking at 40 million that you use up, as I read it, to deal with 100 million. Am I right?
No. So what that paragraph states is the whole of the council's budget, including staff and services, goods and works, is 140 million. 40 million we spend on PAYE, so staff costs. Right. But then what I'm trying to say is there's a lot of resource that goes into managing our staff, which equates to 40 million, but not as much resource goes into managing the £100 million worth of spend that the council spends each year. Although last year was a lot more than that because of the specific capital projects.
Yeah. Perhaps, Chair, I asked my question the wrong way. So dealing with this 100 million, and you've only got 3 staff there, and you want to do lots of things according to the strategy, how are we going to do it if you only got 3 staff?
I'll make the point of the whole focus of the strategy is how the council manages procurement as a corporate priority, not so much how the council manages its tendering processes, which is what the majority of the procurement staff do. Yeah. Right. So procurement as a business function looks at how the council organises its services and takes those to the market, and that's how we do it, or we should be doing it council-wide. So it's pulling in the resources from a lot of departments, but coordination from the central team.
Okay. You mentioned the commercial strategy, which I think all councillors have been waiting for some time. So that's going to be a very important strategy. You mentioned 6 months. Is that going to come to scrutiny, first of all?
I have no reason why I couldn't. Yeah, we've got a draft in existence now, but we're just refining that on the back of the part in the strategy where we talk about intelligent procurement, and there's like 7 pillars of the intelligent procurement where commercial fits into that. So we're trying to take our procurement processes through the lens of commercialization to see what additional benefits we can get from that. But we can bring that to scrutiny.
That's fine. One other question I've got in the middle of the report, and I quote, encouraging suppliers to adopt fair working practices and policy to promote equality, diversity and inclusion. Do you have any difficulty with any employers in that respect, and do they adhere to all of that?
The reality is we don't always know, because we don't generally have the systems to maintain and collect that data
Right.
But as part of our tendering processes, our selection stages, etc., where we specify the minimum requirements of the companies that we would deal with, we do include modern slavery and all of those questions as part of our tendering process. So it's done at the point of tender so that we know the companies that we're dealing with work ethically, but because contract management is not fully embedded across the organization, I can't wholeheartedly say that 3 years into that contract that things may have changed.
Right. You know, you obviously haven't got the staff in to monitor all of that. Well, you mentioned it, but obviously, clearly, it cannot be monitored properly, can it?
Yeah, this is why we need to rely on technology to help
Yeah.
to help us to capture this data as
Yeah.
part of contract management.
Yeah, I fully understand. And one last one, it's in the covering report. You mentioned that 25, it's 25%, I think, of the work that it comes with this is allocated to local firms. Is there any ways or means of trying to increase that?
It is, and as part of the work in the strategy where we intend to start regular supplier engagement sessions so that what we're doing now is we collect data once a year to say what we're going to be doing for the next 12 months. We want to make sure that our suppliers locally are aware of that. So supplier engagement events where we can say this is our pipeline. You know, if anybody's interested in tendering or quoting for any of these projects, let us know in advance. So we can at least, if they're not up to a skill level to tender, then we may be able to pull in help from MTech, etc., to help them to do that. So that's one aspect. There is actually more spend going locally, which isn't reported, because you got companies like Hughes Forest, Travis Perkins, and companies like that, where the invoices, the money is sent out of Wales, but the actual employment is in Wales. So we could adjust that figure up because these companies reside in Merthyr, but we actually pay out to Merthyr, you know, but the money that we pay pays their wages. So there are some adjustments we can make to that to make it look more positive.
So you're doing work, I don't know whether it entails that, IT, etc., to capture, try and break that down and capture it, because I think that's important. That when people see it or employers out there read this report and think, well, oh, that's not a high figure, but it's higher than that, and obviously, hopefully, we need to get to the accurate figure covering the county borough.
To be fair, our stats on spend with local suppliers, considering the size of the borough, is really quite healthy compared to other places. I think we're lucky that we don't have maybe as many gaps in the market. So if you think about there's certain things that we may buy that there's no business locally to deliver that. So obviously then there may be some piece of work that needs to be done in developing that part of the market locally, you know, by trying to bring some inward investment into Merthyr to deliver those services. But at the moment, our stats are quite healthy, to be fair.
And the workshops you mentioned to alert employers locally that there's something in the pipeline that they might be interested in, that's already started, is it?
We're planning for that now because I've just collected the data to enable that to happen, and we've also developed a local business register as well, so that we're going to be inviting companies to register on that, and then we're hopefully going to develop that so we can have some two-way communication on it. So if we've got an opportunity, we can advertise it to respective companies that are registered within a certain classification.
That's good. That's good, and that's fine. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Clive. Going on from what Clive said, in terms of like if we say get a contractor in and then they purchase in items locally. Would you know that data as well?
No, no, we don't currently have the systems to collect anything beyond what we call tier one. So
Okay.
our immediate contractors. What
Yeah.
happens below that is unknown to a point. However, on larger contracts such as Pendray refurbishment, for
Yeah.
instance, there is a set of data that has to be collected as part of the community benefits program, and tier two data is collected as part of that. I'm aware, but I don't know if it actually specifies who that money is spent with.
Okay, we don't have anything in, say, our contract that says you need to be spending within a certain distance of the project.
That forms part of the well-being impacts, which is in the strategy.
Okay.
So as part of the contract, we'll be assigning a certain percentage of every contract to say, you need to do X, Y, and Z. So we'll be looking at measures such as local employment. So we gather that information, and it's money spent in the local supply chain is one of the measures within the wellbeing impacts suite as well. So we start to gather that information as we go through this
Yeah.
term of the strategy.
Yeah, thank you. There's like, I was going to ask you later, but I know David wants to come in. But it's around corporate responsibility. You know, there's been some large projects and outside of, say, the local authority where I feel that they haven't given enough back to the local community. Is that something you want to write in for all departments to, when they write in their plans for their project, that these contractors need to give back to the local community?
Definitely, that's the whole point of the wellbeing objectives and the wellbeing impacts, because whilst we know what the cost of a contract is, we want to try and gain information on what the value of that contract is and how the contractors can give back as part of their work. So that forms part of the wellbeing impact work that we're going to be delivering as part of this strategy.
Great, thank you. David?
Hi, Paul. The 100 million spend, you said that's 25% of your spend, so that's around 25 million. It was 613 suppliers, and these you say are local suppliers. How do you classify what how local is local?
I think I put it in the report that we have classified local as within the county borough.
Right.
So it's CF46, CF47, CF48 postcodes.
Do you think 613 is a lot?
No, there's a caveat on that. The spend data, which comes from our Aggresso system, our financial management system, also includes grants. So where we've got small grants going out, etc., that's all classified as spend.
Yeah.
So there's a piece of work we need to do to try and remove that element. It's around about 2 million in total. As I said, we've got an adjustment which we need to make to bring on all the suppliers that are based in
So
Merthyr.
they're not really suppliers, they're grants, yeah.
Yeah. So there's that as well. So the 613, it's an accurate number because we use a specific spend analysis system to generate those stats, but it does include some grants.
On a typical corporate spend, if you used Pareto analysis, 80% of your spend is typically with 20% of your suppliers. Is that true for your spend, that most of your suppliers isn't around 20%?
It is very true, yeah. And the majority of our tail end spend in the 80 is schools.
Yeah, so schools is a large percentage. Do you find it difficult controlling expenditure in schools because they'll do their own thing?
We can't control expenditure
No.
in schools. We can only advise, which we are doing through the commercial section. We've been working with the schools for the best part of 12 months. We've had some good news stories on there where we've directed them to specific public sector frameworks that have been delivered in Wales for supply of education supplies. Collectively, we know the schools can save up to 200,000 just by using one arrangement.
You've got the furniture contracts and various things that have been agreed nationally and, should be supported. Do you adopt a preferred and approved vendor system? Have you got by category preferred and approved vendors or not?
No, under the current PCR 2015, we shouldn't really be using preferred suppliers.
So anybody can supply, really?
I say yes. If we advertise, they generally are always open tenders so that anybody can apply to tender for our our business.
In the last few years, we've seen inflation taking off, which must have been affecting you in terms of prices. Have you got a cost reduction strategy, and have you found it difficult to control costs in the last couple of years with energy going up and food prices and this? Yeah.
Yeah, there's a limit to what we can control in terms of inflation, unfortunately. So we don't have a specific cost strategy, but we treat every contract on its merits, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But it's been very, very difficult to control those costs.
No, it's got to be easier when you're on inflation's under control and things are steady. Yeah. In terms of corporate, have you got a risk management strategy?
From a procurement perspective,
In terms of risk management, looking at various things, what is to protect the Merthyr Council? Is there a risk strategy in terms of procurement and major areas of spend?
there's not a specific risk strategy, but procurement does have a risk register.
Right.
Yeah, but we apply risk to gateways that we do for when we're going through the procurement process.
Obviously, you mentioned procurement processes change, and you set up what you call this commercial board. And I know you've took on a commercial manager. Have you seen much success coming out of that?
It's been a good resource to have a new viewpoint on the way that we deliver some of our projects. There has been some difficulty with regards to the council's ability to invest in certain projects, which does hamper our efforts to some degree. But obviously, as far as commercial is concerned, Adam is integrated into a number of projects at the moment, helping with things like the private wire from Penedre to the hospital, etc. So he's got quite a wide remit at the moment in terms of energy generation and looking at commercial opportunities through that.
Obviously, you've got a lot of energy contracts that are timing out. Now prices are falling. You're hopefully starting to see some benefit on that side of the contracts, where you obviously it's been very painful the last couple of years, I bet. One final thing, you said the purchasing thresholds have changed. What have they reduced to, and are you seeing benefits from that?
There was one specific threshold which was changed as part of the new procurement rules, which I put through council in June 2021. We used to have a lower threshold of £5,000, which we call the best value threshold. So anything under 5k, then you just had to demonstrate best value. If you were happy with a single quote, you could accept it. We pushed that up to 15,000 in June 2021. And the basis for doing that was to enable us to say, if we want to do something locally, then we've got a £15,000 threshold where we could approach a local company to deliver something, whereas they may not have had the capacity to tender for or to quote for, or the experience to do that. It's difficult to quantify whether or not that's been a success, but I would have to look back at the data to compare previous years' local spend with what we've got now to do that.
That the departments are doing that, they must feel that they're getting value from it. Would you think or not?
A lot of the value comes from the fact that it saves a lot of officers' time as well,
Yeah,
to be honest with you, and engage in the market.
Okay, and in terms of admin, what is the process of processing invoices? Is it a match purchasing system?
Invoices is manual at the moment in the authority.
It's not matched
Well,
with any purchase orders.
No.
Don't you think it should be controlled
Yes.
that way? Yeah.
Definitely.
Okay. Thank you very much, Paul.
Thanks both. Any other questions? Councillor Williams-Price.
Thank you. Just to pick up regarding obligations around fair work, etc. Can I ask you to expand upon our current obligations, what we're doing at the moment, particularly in regards to if there's any obligation on suppliers to be living wage employers?
As far as I'm aware, I don't believe Merthyr Council are an accredited living wage employer. As far as I'm aware, if we were, I think that would place an obligation on us to ensure that all of our contractors were paying at least the living wage. I'm not aware that we are. So we don't necessarily specify that. We do specify national minimum wage in our service contracts. So things like our cleaning contracts, security contracts, etc., all have those clauses contained within them. But as far as the living wage, I don't believe we are. However, I'm aware that we have uplifted social care contracts in the last couple of years to the living wage, but that wasn't something that was done through procurement. That was a national incentive, wasn't it?
Thanks. So unless the authority was to become an accredited living wage employer, there would be no change to that condition under this new social partnership policy.
No, the Social Partnership Act requires us to include social clauses within our service and works contracts. So that's something we have to consider. But those clauses haven't been written yet, so I can't comment on them.
Okay, thank you. And then I think it's already been touched upon, but I was going to ask you to elaborate on what challenges you foresee in ensuring that this strategy is embedded across the council.
It's the killer question, isn't it? Time, I'd say, is the first thing. It's very difficult for us to deliver a strategy which requires some resource when so many officers across the authority are struggling for time, and time is what we need to be able to plan effectively. Financial resources in terms of contract management and collecting wellbeing impact data so that we can report on it. We don't have the facility or the resources to do that at present. Those are the two main areas of concern. There are some unknowns in respect of the Procurement Act. There is a new part of this act which is called the transparency regime, which is going to increase the amount of official notices that the council will have to publish related to nearly every single contract, because the Procurement Act now includes something called regulated sub-threshold contracts, which includes stuff down to £25,000, not including VAT. So that's going to place a significant drain on our resources. So that's going to be something that we need to carefully try to plan and manage after the 28th of October. We're obviously planning for it now to see what the impact's going to be by looking back at contracts we've done over the last couple of years and applying the new regime to it to say how many more notices would we have had to have done. So that's a significant piece of work that the procurement team are going to be managing.
Thanks, Anna. Going on Anna's question, in terms of like across the local authority, will there be or could there be training for all departments? Could it possibly be, I'm not sure mandatory is the right word, but is that something that's being planned, training?
We've currently got, as part of our training platform, I think it's all wrapped up with Bob's business, isn't it? Certain members and officers have got the 6 knowledge drops for the Procurement Act to look at as part of their training syllabus. So that's currently in existence. The Social Partnership Act training hasn't been finalised yet, but when that comes, there'll be certain officers within the authority that will need to see that as well. I'm currently undergoing on the procurement team further training as a 10-module course for the Procurement Act. And I think legal are going to be doing that as well. So there's various training going on. And when I deliver the new procurement rules, I need to go around the authority then to deliver training specifically for those as well.
Anna, did you have any other questions? Oh, no. Clive, I can see it light based on my screen, so do you want to come in?
Yeah, 2 further questions, Chair. Both in relation to a number of pertinent points that David Chaplin brought up. You say that invoicing is manual. Is it the intention to, deal with that and have, for example, have the local audit team been looking at that as well?
Personally, it's my intention to move our manual system, which has been in existence for about 20 years,
Mm.
to another type of system, probably scanning. So we ingest invoices electronically, they get electronically read and workflow to respective officers to authorize. But that requires some significant investment from it's basically a replacement of our financial management system in some shape or form. So that is my intention with regards to invoicing, but how and when we can do that, I can't answer that.
Right. Have you any idea what the likely cost might be for that?
It depends on what we decide we want.
Right.
It could be hundreds of thousands, to be honest.
So at some time, to bring us up to the 21st century, you'll have to put forward a case for that being part of the budget. Yeah. Okay. Going back to schools, it's like a number of us, we're governors in schools, and I happen to be on a finance committee of a secondary school and a primary school. And it occurred to me a long, long time ago, as to 20 odd schools, why aren't we bulk buying on behalf of all the schools on loads of items? Have you had discussions with representatives of all the schools to go down that route? And if you have you had any kickbacks on it?
Yes, we have had conversations with various school forums around some potential buying strategies. For instance, trying to use some of the resources of secondary schools as being like centre of excellence. So, for instance, one school would buy all the exercise books for all the schools, yeah, and things like that. But we haven't been met with any favourable responses on that yet, namely because it's quite a lot of work to set up, and
Right.
we'd require the schools to do that with commercial support. But it's not something that we're going to be doing at the moment, which is why we have pushed the schools or suggested to the schools to start using national frameworks that we're aware will save them money and still maintain the quality of the goods that they require.
Yeah.
So that's been almost like the first step into improving their buying practices.
So do they accept that? Do they understand that they can make savings, year on year, going through that national framework?
They do, and we can demonstrate that because we provide them with the spend data periodically.
Right.
So our challenge is to engage with the schools that haven't engaged.
So is it a lot of work to deal with them and set this up on, because, the mind boggles at the number of items the school purchases on a daily basis?
Yes, if you take the schools off the top of my head, if I can remember, because it's while I've looked at the data, the schools account for 10% of all spend that goes through Aggresso, but they account for more than 55% of the amount of transactions
Right.
that are carried out. So you'll find with the schools, it's a lot of low value, multiple transactions done a lot, and there's an awful lot of administrative buying going on. And that's one of the things we would love to suggest to the schools to reduce. The first thing was to look at this main framework for educational supplies. We also want to look at some of the other areas that they buy. It's simple things like water coolers, skips. There's so many, but it's a case of what to tackle first. So we took the low hanging fruit, that's the education supplies, moved everybody away from one specific buying organisation over to Wrexham's education supplies framework, and that has been the first success, because we've even had comments back to say, we switched to this now, and we probably saved a learning support assistant on the back of it, And those are positives.
Yeah. And when you get to some of the larger items, when you're buying computers, because they don't last forever, and in the two schools I'm in, I noticed that it's every short few years. Dispense with those. We got to. So when you think of the 20-odd schools, we could currently be saving thousands, and the situation we're in with schools, because of the reducing budgets now more than ever. Chair, I'm sorry, making a comment. Is the time to do it? I would have thought from procurement point of view.
It is, but as I said, we can only advise. We can't enforce anything with the schools, which is the frustrating thing, really. Procurement and commercial do not have an SLA with the schools, so every piece of support that we've given them to date has been free of charge. They've obviously benefited from that quite a lot through changing that one framework, and obviously through that work we're obviously looking at various other areas. But yeah, I agree with you, Clive. There's quite a lot to be done with the schools in reducing their overall spend.
Yeah, I'll start by raising it in the 2 schools I'm a governor, to be honest with you, because it's got to be done now rather than 12 months' time. Thank you.
Thanks, Clive. I'm just going to tell you a story with one of the schools I was in. This is a while ago, mind. One of the high schools I'm a governor in, they were going to buy a HDMI lead, and then they contacted the local authority to purchase that lead, and it was 35, 40 pounds for that lead. And then obviously they're going to buy it on Amazon for £2.50 or whatever it is. So you can see where they might be coming from as well. They need to try and get the best bang for their buck as well. So that needs to be looked at as well, I think.
In terms of IT, obviously there's a school's IT service, which obviously all the schools are signed up to. We have various IT policies in terms of what we can buy and where we can buy it from. IT have locked that down quite a lot. Yeah, so IT will manage all the buy-in on behalf of everybody, including the council. So we don't really have a say over where we get equipment from. Although I totally agree with you, if you can get an HDMI lead for £3, then buy it for £3. But I don't have specific control over that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And going on to some of the systems, and like I'm a governor and have worked with lots of primary schools, and they all use different systems in terms of learning as well, and they all buy into different packages, which is a bit mind-boggling. Where one school says, "Oh, this is what we're going to use," and you'd think that the education for our children would be the same throughout the borough, really.
Actually, when myself and John Kelly last went to the forum in the Orbit Centre, that very question came up from one of the heads, where, because they were all around the table, they said, well, why are we all using different systems? Like, you got some using class charts and a few others. So they decided to have a talk amongst themselves about whether or not one system could suit another school. So that's the first thing, isn't it? The heads need to talk together to decide what it is they want to take forward collectively, because my department can help them take that to the market if they want to, but they've got to want to.
Yeah, that would be great. David?
Yeah, you mentioned it. You reckoned it was hundreds of thousands to put in an invoice system. In my experience, I worked for a number of companies, and one over 20 years ago, I went to work for another Brains Brewery. They had no central purchasing system. Everyone was doing their own thing. The finance director was pulling his hair out. They couldn't cope with the amount of invoices they were having. They were allowing suppliers to be paid cash out of the till from the pubs, and they just couldn't control their expenditure. Within 2 months, I had it sorted, because we just introduced an Excel spreadsheet system. They knew the ledger codes. We'd have the invoice, we'd have the Excel spreadsheet, and that could be automatically loaded in the system and do the transaction. We even got people like Welsh Water, where we had 120 pubs, to do it monthly for us. So where we were having bills all over the spell, we were having them on our correct accounting periods. We'd say, on this day we want the invoices. We would know we'd open and closing stock with the pubs. We'd know what they spent. We can push the button and we could work out their profit and loss. And if it was if it wasn't within margins, we'd in there with the auditors. And I did that in a matter of months at very little expense to, things can be done if you've got an open mind and speak to people. And another company I went to, we just uploaded invoices on a portal system, and the supplier would do it for us, and they would appear. So I don't always say it's hundreds of thousands of pounds. You can develop your own systems and do things if you speak to your accounts, and have an open mind.
Yeah, okay, I'll take that on board, but I would say that our financial management system is relatively complex, with a number of, well, in fact, a lot of interfaces with our financial management system. So when I said could be hundreds of thousands, that's for replacing the whole financial management system, which would include ordering, invoice scanning, payment, etc. So it's not just one element. But in terms of where we are now, we do use spreadsheets a lot, especially accountancy. The Aggressor system is fed from Excel, and it feeds to Excel as well for all the monthly accounting.
I was supposed to say we got the suppliers to give it to us, so we didn't have to even input it. If they had the ledgers and everything, we could put it in, and it would took a lot of slog out of the accounts for us as well.
Yeah, unfortunately, we have financial regulations which probably prevent us from doing that, because we have to have the checked and marked off and the authorized signature and then the input signature, and if
We do that. We would check they would come in and get checked by somebody. That's the department to do that. They submit it to them and they say yes, that's right, do it.
Okay. In terms of invoices, do we still get a lot? You mentioned scanning. Is there still a lot of paper form, or is them? Yeah.
On an annual basis, we are processing 60,000 paper invoices, and we have a P2P system which processes around 10% of the total fully electronically. But we can't use P2P for everything.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? No? Any comments? I feel like Clive wants to make a comment, and so he's over it. No, I got no comments. Yeah. Oh, sorry, Anna. It's not coming. Oh, yeah, Anna's not coming on my screen. I do apologize. Coming in.
Just to reflect on that, really, I think, although I appreciate what you've described is probably not unusual for local authorities or even public sector organisations, maybe. Obviously, we've talked a lot recently as a council about our budget position and transformation. And I think this has given a really interesting insight into that and where potential transformation could come from. But I think to my mind, this perhaps isn't something that's particularly high on council members' agenda at present. So as these strategies come to council, I think any additional support or information or workshops that the department could provide to perhaps increase that awareness would be really welcome.
Thanks, Anna. Any other comments, Councillor Jones? Oh, yes. Sorry, before you call you in now.
No, go on, Clive. I'll go last.
Well, it's only you've made reference to the acts coming in October this year, which is obviously going to change things again. So everybody's got to get used to dealing with that and what it says in the legislation. And perhaps at some time, when that's fully embedded, you may want to come back to us and inform us as to how that's working and if it's progress.
Thanks, Clive. Alan, do you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. We really appreciated the opportunity to come to share the currently where we are with procurement and the whole procurement cycle and commercialisation plus the legislation, because hopefully what we've demonstrated, procurement isn't about going out to tender to build a school. It's the whole life organisational support structure of the local authority. But we don't see, you are a snapshot of the internal governance of the local authority, which can make us efficient or inefficient, um, financially slick or financially sluggish. So it's a very, very important aspect of work for the local authority, which I think it's been off the radar completely, and especially from a whole organisation transformation perspective. And as you've correctly identified, um, you can't underestimate how old and clunky our internal systems are, because they, as Paul said, they haven't been changed for 20 years. They've just grown on an organic interface basis. So I think if we're true, if we're really serious about corporate transformation, I think this is an excellent starting point that perhaps this committee could champion.
Yeah, definitely agree. I think, yeah, I think it's something we'll be discussing our forward work program over the next couple of weeks, today and next couple of weeks. And I think, you know, it'd be great to see you back in, say, 6 months and see how it's all going. Yeah, like to thank you for coming in today and sneaking you in early, you know, so you've got to shoot off. Thanks, Paul. You're welcome to leave now.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, moving on. We're going to go back. Item agenda 3, town centre buildings, town centre strategic plan. Alan, is it you or Zoe?
It's one of our favourite topics in this committee, isn't it? Town centre buildings, and a bit of strategy in between. Yeah, so we pulled the report together. There's an awful lot of information. We've discussed a lot of the buildings, we've discussed a lot of the initiatives, we've discussed a lot about the town centre, but I think it's useful to see this amount of information in one place, which obviously gives us the opportunity for you as a scrutiny function to have a wide range of potential questions you want to ask us, but not too many. Yeah, so if I hand over to you.
Thanks, Al. Yeah, so within the introduction and background of the report, I've sort of had to go back to the original VVP programme to sort of start this journey off, because I think, as Alan rightly said, you know, there's so much information, so much work that we've tried to undertake on the number of buildings that we've highlighted within the report, that we've gone back to that point when I think the journey really started on a lot of those buildings. So apologies, we've gone back, you know, 10 years really. But it sort of set the scene. Yeah, so we've gone into the detail then. I know we discussed in last scrutiny around, putting a bit more detail around some of the buildings we discussed in the previous one, which was the town centre master plan. Because as well, we were focusing on the empty properties. We've tried to cover all of the housing and enterprise initiatives, as well as just, you know, what we were doing with the listed buildings, as we felt, you know, that was really, really important for committee to understand, you know, how much work was being undertaken on a wider basis outside of just focusing on those listed properties. And then concluding the report then, we just highlighted, you know, where we want to be in future. I have added, as you've all noticed, a section in there which we wouldn't ordinarily do. But we've added under section 6 key risks to delivery, as it didn't fit in any of the sort of where we were, where we want to be, where we want to go next. But it was very important for us to highlight some of the risks that we are facing in terms of empty properties and the redevelopment of those properties within the town centre.
Yeah, just to add the one point that Zoe made, probably 15 years ago, then physical regeneration, urban regeneration, it was just about the fabric of the building and renovation. I think we've got a lot smarter over the last 5-6 years. So when you're looking at the building, you're not just looking at that physical capital investment, but it's it's looking at the end use of the building, the end user, and what package of support the potential end user would need. And I think that's absolutely critical. It can be a slow process because the amount of buildings that we're dealing with and the actual size and cost of that process, but probably without that whole life package of the after use and the support, we wouldn't have been as successful as we've been.
Okay, thanks both. The report is quite lengthy and there's quite a lot of buildings within it. Should we go through building by building? Do you think that'd be a good way? Yeah. If we go like the first one on here is General Hospital, Clive's favourite. So, Clive, would you want to come in?
Yes, Chair. When I retire from as elected member, I think I'll write a book about this place. And on couple of that, I've got other associations with the building because my wife used to work there as a ward sister. So I knew the building from end to end when it was a hospital. It is an absolute crying shame to see the state of the building at the moment. And both Councillor Louise Millett-Vokes and myself did, I think, an Irish jig when we found out that the current owner was obviously serious in developing this building. It went on for a bit longer than we anticipated, but then we were told that he is considering a housing development there in discussions with us, with the relevant officers. So as you know, it went to planning on the 28th of February. Before that, we had a site meeting, which I asked for, planning site meeting on the 5th of February. The developer's agent was there, because they don't always turn up to a planning site visit. So apart from others, we were asking him questions as well. And I was absolutely dumbstruck to find out about a week ago that because, and I think it's probably because he's had plan permission for 30 flats, he's put this up for auction on Rightmove. There's been a long and necessary history, in my view, Chair, of non-development here. We had the doctor who, for reasons we'll never know, whose soul is deceased now, because I think the officer at the time bent over backwards to try and help him, Alan, develop it, place. That took years, and then nothing happened with it. And then eventually he sold it. If it is sold now, this will be at least the fourth owner of the building. And it's on one of the main access routes into town. People driving here for the first time, if they're coming off the heads of the valley, down through Dowlas, Pendarran, this is one of the first buildings they see because for a start, because of the bad bend, they've got to slow down. So they can't miss looking over and seeing it. And some of you officers know, members, I've written, and so has my colleague, written about this because, and I know it's, Chair, it is not easy when you're trying to channel a development, but we've really got to do something with this one. I've lost count of the number of times that I've had to explain to residents around there, one by one, what are the reasons, why nothing's been done, why there's been a hold up. And I am totally exasperated and exhausted with it. Of all the cases I dealt with the last 20 years for this ward, and I know it's the same with Councillor Minette Vokes in the 2 years being here, the number one item, top of the agenda, has been this building. You know, I know it's only happened recently, but I'd like to know from the officers, because I really think we got to go back to the drawing board. I would be surprised if it's not sold. So we do for another owner, and God knows what they want to do with it, because this planning application was different to the last one. So if it's sold, they might want to put in a different type of planning application, and then we've another few years down the road. And I'm sorry, it's a history and it's a comment really. I'd like to know from the officers what we can do about it. Because, you know, and another frustration, I may as well say it though, and probably say it in planning several times. This is, people keep asking me, oh, it's listed. And I said, well, it's not listed in this true sense that you know of a listed building. It's locally listed. So all we're going to be left with at the end of the day is the facade. And, you know, just a few yards down there, the old job centre, the labour, the original labour place, practically opposite the Theatre Royal. And all we've got there is just the front facade of a building. And people ask me, what's all that about? Well, you know, we wanted to keep the history there. There's nothing behind it. So my plea is, can we look at this? Can we look at it completely outside the box? Because it's been derelict and empty for 22 years, and something's got to change.
I think firstly, Councillor Jones, we've got to wait to see what happens in auction.
Oh, I understand that.
So we met with a developer this week, this week, who may be interested in purchasing it for redevelopment, which looked promising, and wanted some information about the potential support that would be available for development. So I think we just got to wait to see what comes out of it.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, the interesting thing around that is I understand your frustration, because, you know, we've had owners in the past who purchased the building, have expectations of funding or support, or, you know, wanting to do certain things there, and it doesn't materialise. But we're hoping that perhaps, because this developer has contacted us this time, has shown a, you know, a real interest, wants to understand the funding landscape, etc., that if they do look to acquire it, that they do have a plan in place then.
And well, thank you for that. And well, by the sound of it, got at least one interested, but it needs to be somebody who's seriously interested in development. It's not going to, you know, leave us in limbo by make an application for planning, another planning application, and then decides for whatever reasons the costs are too high, and leave it again, because that, in my opinion, it can never happen again. We've come too far with this.
Can I just come in?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
In terms of, like, we say Tregenna, we've helped work with somebody to purchase that. Is that something that could be done for this property?
At this time, no, because we've been able to, the Tregenna had a specific end purpose that we looked at, which we were able to match with Welsh Government funding. If you look at the general at the moment, probably there's only two routes of public funding. There's potentially support through our placemaking program, and there's the social housing grant route, and that's basically it. See, the problem we've had so far is it's been bought by lay people, not developers. So you've had this string of doctors who bought it, probably looking for a retirement investment, based on the fact they could develop 20, 30 units, but we've never, the only true developer that wanted the building, and they were brilliant, were trying to work with Adam Greenland.
Oh, yeah, from
But
the Chaplain Cardiff.
Yeah, he was, I mean, they were brilliant and they would have pulled it off, but obviously he was clearly a very difficult individual, and didn't cooperate with them. But if we can get a developer who's going to develop it themselves, then we've got a fighting chance, I think.
Chair, if this doesn't come off, if, no one puts a bid in for this, so it's up there for sale forever. Because of the history with this and nothing's happened in 22 years, is this one in particular that we could look at compulsory purchase?
We could, yes, we could look at it, but obviously to enter a successful compulsory purchase, firstly we'd have to have an end use scheme for it, and we'd also have to have the funding to deliver the development. Those are the two basic main criteria.
Sorry, what was the scheme you mentioned, Alan?
I said what we'd have to have a scheme. So
Yeah.
we'd have to have an end scheme,
Or end scheme?
and we'd have to have the funding as well in place.
Right. And one other question, and I've been racking my brains as to what possibly could be done with this. Does it necessarily require development? Because, and they're looking at Craig here now, so don't collapse off the chair, because I know how these planners tick after all these years. But if that facade was taken down, for me, looking for open green spaces, in my view, perhaps I'm barking completely up the wrong tree, but that's an area that could be developed as a mini park, green area. And there's actually a stream on the one side, right at the back of Garth, which runs down and goes into the system on the roadway there. So for me, that's talking about thinking outside the box. That is probably something else that should be looked at as well.
Yeah, I'll just come in there, Clive. In relation to at present, the site is allocated for residential development in the local development plan. However, we will be commencing a review. So it is something that could be looked at again, but it'll depend on, again, what the council's priorities are for the site,
Yeah.
what level of housing we'll need in the next version of the plan. And also as well, it'll need to align with the placemaking plan as well, because like I said, there are already some areas of open space sort of planned in and around the town centre. So it's just striking that balance then between open space, areas of open space and areas of development as well.
So is that a possibility then, Craig? That when does this, I know you're reviewing the LDP, when does that start?
Yeah, what will happen LDP wise is alongside the annual monitoring report, which is usually published around about September, October each year. This year we'd also be publishing the review report alongside it, which the vast majority of the time recommends the local authorities go back to the start and start preparing a new plan to cover the next 15 years. Early indications are that is likely to be the scenario for us. So then either very late this year or early next year, we produce the delivery agreement, which will set the timetable for preparing the plan then over the next 3 to 4 years from the end of this year.
And another frustration with these buildings, when it takes years to go through planning, and the application being submitted and discussions with the developer. During that time, of course, not just the old General Hospital, Chair, but elsewhere, they become dumping grounds. I've lost count of the number of times that I've had to write in to the authority, either the planning department or the environmental health department, because frankly, from what I've seen in the main, the owners really couldn't care less, and particularly if they don't live in the county borough, they don't seem to be serious about keeping the area clean and tidy, and that's another drawback with these sites.
Okay,
So
totally agree.
we got to, in many cases, we got to try and go down the enforcement route to remind these people that whilst they bought this building, derelict buildings, and particularly if there's an outside area there, it's their responsibility to keep that clean and tidy and remove all the litter, cans, bottles, you name it, that are dumped on these sites.
Agree. Thanks, Clive. I'm sure it's high on Zoe's priority and her team now. Now it's gone back to say I was a bit shocked, like yourself as well. One of the residents living opposite, I know them, and I saw them, and they told me, and I was like, oh no, it's just gone to planning, and she was like, oh no. Then I was like, didn't know myself. Any other questions regarding the hospital? No, I think Clive asked them all. To be fair, we're all desperate to get the majority of these buildings sorted, like you guys are. So, okay, we'll move on to the next hot topic, which will be St. Tidville's hospital site. Should we wait? Is for Alan to come back in, or are you okay with it? Yeah. Questions on the hospital site, John?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. If I take you to 4.7 of the report and the last sentence there, the site was demolished with the exception of the listed entrance, and there were no direct plans to develop the site at that time. I've been in contact with Brett Hughes for building control for the last 4 or 5 weeks regarding a building inside the grounds, which backs onto Union Street. You've got a big wall, and the building is up on top of that wall. Now, he's been in touch with planning, and they have said that building is listed as well. So I don't know if, Craig, if you know anything about that, because the problem is the building is bellowing out, and the people living in the Pine End house are very worried if that comes, it's going to come straight down onto their property and more or less demolish their property as well. But they're saying it's listed building and there's nothing we can do.
I think in that case, I think it's what we class as being classed as listed because it's within the curtilage of the original listed building itself, like such. To think of an example, yes, I suppose Carmarthen Castle and Park. I said buildings within the park by default are listed because they're within the curtilage of that listed building. And I said that I think it's was it maybe sort of like a nurse's house or nurse's dwelling, I think, that was on site, the one that backs onto Union Street.
That's right, yeah, you go in through the front facade and it's over to the right hand side.
Yeah, so so that ultimately the same principles would apply as the listed structure at the front.
So there is nothing we could do about it then, really. God forbid if we have another bad winter, I know we're going into summer, if we have another bad winter and something happens, who's going to be liable?
There are obviously more restrictions to what we can do because of its status as listed building, but if the building does become dangerous, then building control could look to take action, but it'll depend on the condition.
I think Brett has put it in the hands of David Cross at the moment, I think. And they're week, I think they liaising back and forth to see what they can do with it.
Yeah, I'll check up on that tomorrow to see exactly where we are.
Just one other question.
Yeah,
that's okay.
Yeah, no.
So do we know who the owners of this land is now then? the hospital site itself?
Yeah, so in the section 5 of the report where we're referring to, we've been working with a developer, that's the current owner. So they've secured planning on the site and have been working with us. We've also secured Transforming Towns funding, and that was back in, did I say 2021? But we've been to and fro since that point, I think it's fair to say, on the tenure on the site. And we're still awaiting a response from the developers to exactly how they wish to go forward. The one thing for us now, though, is we need to start pushing on this fairly quickly, as obviously Welsh Government has held that funding for a number of years. So ordinarily, with any project we've mentioned within this report and the previous report brought to scrutiny around the Transforming Towns programme, we secure the funding, we move on the project immediately, spend, get those outputs and onto the next scheme. But with this one, you know, we're in year 4 now, so they are pushing us to say, you know, what is happening. So we're hoping within the next couple of months that we'll start to see some movement on this, whether the developer, the current owner, are going to take it forward or whether there's another solution. But we're going to have to decide that by the end of the summer, because we've had that sort of 6-month grace period since the end of the last financial year to find a solution for it.
So could the same situation arise like has happened up on the General Hospital site, where this developer now says, oh, I'll put it into auction or whatever, and then somebody else or nobody comes in for it, we're going to be left with it as it is?
I doubt it, because the remediation costs, no one could develop that site without quite a big subsidy, because basically they just knocked it down. This one, we have started tentative discussions with Welsh Government, so we said, because there's still an allocation on it, about a CPO.
Right. So hopefully then it could be light at the end of the tunnel with a bit of luck. Okay, thanks for that. Thank you.
And so George?
Yeah, so following on that, just for clarity, because this went to planning and there was a planning application for 70 odd you know, different units, houses. I think there was some flats there. Yeah, mixed use. So at the time of the planning application, who you talking to now, is it the same owner who was there and had planning permission?
Yeah, it's the same owner, and but the owner brought in a developer, and
Right.
at that time it was a London-based developer who still sort of is around. We lined up the whole funding package. We lined up one of the local housing associations. Yeah, if you remember.
Yeah.
We cut out social housing grant, and they just never went through with it.
So the same owner has got a different developer now, is that right?
No, it's the same developer as when the planning permission came in.
So planning permission was given, what, 3 years ago or longer?
Well, one of the original issues they had, as Alan said, the funding was required for the remediation works on the site, and to prepare that site to be viable to build the houses. When the offer of grant came through, it was profiled in a different way to what was anticipated, which was risk management from a Welsh Government side of things, which of course we would continue through our grant agreement. So we looked at a number of options around financial modelling. And of course, during this period, there were other issues occurring as well. You know, we talked about it earlier in relation to Paul's world, you know, inflation. So the prices had gone up, the cost of the scheme had increased. And the developers started to look at different options as well, whether they'd look at more affordable, more market homes. And we just haven't sort of concluded that whole process, unfortunately. But that's what we've got to look at now within the
Right.
next 6 months in order to finalise, to confirm with the Welsh Government what we are going to do with that £3 million, sorry, £1.3 million. We don't want to lose that.
So when you say remediation, do you mean that the buildings were knocked down and they just left all the rubble there and disappeared? Is that what happened?
Yeah, well, they cleared the site, but obviously there's still far more remediation in the ground now that needs to take place. So it's cleared, but it's not cleared as in to develop.
So do you mean that because there's slight gradients there, isn't it? You know, there's a steep embankment on the one side. Is that anything to do with it? Or
No, more. I mean, it's one way the concrete slab.
all right.
So it's going to take at least that amount of money to prepare it ready to start developing.
So the preparation is quite costly.
Yeah.
There's a cost to it, and you've got to make sure that the money is there for that before anything else
Yeah,
happens.
yeah. Otherwise, it won't be viable.
Ah, right. But it does sound, to answer questions to Councillor Thomas, that there seems to be a bit of progress. Is that right?
I think we come into the end of the journey with them, so there will be progress one way or another.
Right. So if that doesn't end the right way, we may be talking about this being put up for sale with a different owners.
We might issue proceedings to get our hands on the land before that.
Ah, right. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks both. Any other questions on that? Okay, we'll move on. Another building. Another favourite. Theatre Royal. Any questions, please? Clive?
I'm sorry, I shouldn't be laughing, because every time we go past there, after a few months, there's a different auction dealer taking place with it. It's so serious, but it's you can't believe that these things are happening. And I note what it says in the report about this. By the sound of it, I think there's frustration from yourselves of officers, because it's the first time I've seen it in print that you're looking at, because I was told, well, going back 3-4 years, inside was in a dreadful state. Goodness knows what it's like now. But there's all sorts of plans being looked at it for housing, etc. And it's the state of the building. So the answer may well be, unfortunately, you'll have, a few people out there saying, oh, it's wonderful. I remember going there when it was a cinema, and I went myself. But that's all history. It's gone. There's no, as much chance of that being used as another cinema theatre as a pig has of flying over Bertha. So because of the history of going down routes and ending up a dead end, and the different owners, one after another, is there a distinct possibility, as it says here, that you might have to consider demolition?
Craig can come in about some of the constraints now, but there's still a listing on that building. Now, the owner before last made a serious attempt to look at the potential development for residential, but they also went down the road of potentially demolishing and removing the listing, and we involved CADU in that process. But to actually take the listing off a building, even though it's derelict, is a very, very lengthy process. I don't know if Craig wants to explain about the rest of the constraints, especially residential.
Sorry, can I just come in before you come in, Craig? The reference to the demolition in the report as well is the outcome of the feasibility study
Yeah.
that was taken forward.
Yeah.
So as Alan said, we did some work around it, but those two points within there around the restoration and the demolition were the recommendation of the consultant at that time. So other than the discussion with Cadw, no further consideration has been given since that original
Right.
discussion.
Sorry, Chair, before Craig comes in, so I read that it was come out of the
Yeah.
survey that they undertook. So when and these surveys, they cost a pretty packet, I could imagine. So they come out with that, having looked at it in detail. So how serious then is that looked at by the authority and yourselves as officers? Because somebody's taken the time, been asked to do it, done a survey, and what they've said is, at the end of the day, they must be shaking their head.
Okay, so the owner at the time that Alan referred to, we were working with them as a developer to look at options for that building. So we secured funding for them, development funding, to look at this feasibility study and also a structural survey of the building. And that's where these recommendations fell out, because they started to look at, okay, what could the building actually be used for? What's its long-term sustainable use? And then we hit the issues with redeveloping that into residential because it's in the flood zone, etc. So they also looked at the route of demolition because of the significant cost it would take to regenerate that building anyway. And we had some initial conversations with Cadw. Following that, the building was sold at auction, again to another local business owner who wanted to look at residential. So we met with them to explain the situation, the outcome of the report. The existing owner was happy to share that report, but they've made no further communication with us around what they wanted to do with that building. And now that's back up for sale. So from our perspective at this point, we haven't taken any further discussions forward because that building is in private ownership.
Yeah.
And, as far as we are concerned, they were looking to redevelop until recently when it's back up for sale again. So,
yeah.
I think it's looking at the outcome of who the building moves into whose hands now.
And Cadw, because let's be perfectly honest in this open forum, from my experience, ever since I became an elected member, they seem to be, perhaps they're doing their job, but they seem to be a bit of a nightmare. When you have something like this, which is like not the elephant in the room, it's like a dozen elephants there facing you. Don't they understand the reality of the situation that the authority and officer like yourselves are trying to deal with? But every avenue we've gone down, as I said, there's a dead end there. And all the time, over the years, and I've lost count of how many years the Theatre Royal has been empty, but as I guess, probably 18 or 20 at least. So all this time, the building is becoming more and more derelict by the day. So, does somebody come here and go through the building and have a look at it and think with a hard heart on, oh, yes, I see what they mean. Unless they've been in there and around it and looked at it. Is that what they do? Or is it somebody looking at an email and say, no, we'll carry on with that until the year 3100?
Yeah, that'll come in there. Yeah, officers from Cardiff do come out, do visit sites, and there is a buildings at risk register that's prepared as well, that every so often they get officers to go around, look at the condition of the buildings and upgrade them and sort of update the status as the condition they're in. But I think we also need to, I think we just need to realise that whilst there are legislative and legal requirements on us as a local authority and on the owners of the buildings as individuals, and there are obviously certain things that Cadw are aiming to do, from a planning point of view, they are, even though they are a key part of it when it comes to historic assets, they are only one part of the consideration as well. So I think at some point with buildings such as these, there does come a point in time where the buildings can't be saved. So, but I think when you get to that point, it has to be very clearly and sort of heavily evidenced and justified why that building is delisted or why it does need to be demolished. I just to sort of quickly go back in terms of the constraints on the Theatre Royal. The difficulty we're going to have is there's still an in principle no against residential development on that site because it is still in flood zone C2 at the moment. Will be zone 3 when the maps sort of change over when the Welsh Government policy is amended at some point in the near future. So even whilst it is a little more relaxed, the policy stance in terms of flooding and redeveloping buildings, so if the building stays there and is redeveloped, you might have a little bit more of a chance of getting plant permission. It's going to be very difficult to justify residential development in that location moving forward.
So, $64,000 question is, what exactly can we see can be done in the immediate? I know it's up for auction, but we all know, you look at it, there's only so many times that can happen. And all the way the building is becoming more an eyesore. I mean, the council, I presume it cost them, or was the cost put on the owner of the building? The front facade part of it was in a dangerous state. Was it sometime last year we had to put scaffolding up? That had to be made safe. That tells you everything about the state of the building. So I'm glad to hear that, you know, the men and women from Cadw are human beings, and they do come out and don't just sit behind a laptop or their daily lives. But they must be realists when they see a building in this state that it's nearing its end of its life. So as officers, what is the next step? Are we waiting for this to go through the auction and see whoever comes across and wants to redevelop it?
Yeah, I think you've probably sort of touched upon what is going to be a key issue moving forward moving forward for us in terms of all these buildings, is that as time goes on, we're probably going to need to come to a position where we're going to have to prioritize some of them, and it might not be palatable from certain planning policies, from Cadw's perspective, from other perspectives as well, but we might have to accept that some of these buildings may not be here, but we might need to do that in order to ensure that we can protect others.
We got to wait for this auction to take place and see what transpires from that. Is that the next protocol?
Well, we haven't got a plan at the moment because we've got no money, and at this point in time, no appetite to intervene in the market, CPO it, and to knock it down. I mean, that'd be a very expensive job to leave an empty site, which is developable, but it's probably the most viable development on the site would be housing of some type, but that's not possible.
I had questions, but I think they've all been asked. In terms of like the listing of that building, why is that building listed? If you look at the general hospital, that looks a building, and this one, yeah, it just looks like a derelict old building.
Yeah, I think the listing would have been done back at the time when the building was in significantly better condition, and I think he said doesn't look it at the moment because of what's happened to the building over the years. But I think the external design was quite unique at that time. They said it's not your sort of more typical sort of prettier looking building like the Red House, like the General Hospital, things like that. But it was sort of unique, and that's why it was listed. But I think also with the Theatre Royal, significance part of the inside were listed as well. The internal features from when it was that theatre cinema use. We had the balconies. I think there were features on the ceiling that were individually listed as well. All that information is available through Cardo and on the LP maps. But it sort of helps to sort of tell a story on a building like that, which again, because of the state it's in now, you look at it and think, well, why are we bothering? But again, the other side of it, it does make things then that much more difficult in terms of trying to do something with it.
Thanks, Craig. Okay, no more questions on this building. Okay, who are we going next? YMCA? Any questions?
Well, this is it so far, a success story. That's the number one. And you know, this was the second one down from the old General Hospital, but I've sent email after email after email. But what I want to know with this one is that this has now, with a lot of money, been made watertight. And that, I understand, was the first phase. The second phase is then dependent on whether you tap into relevant grants for it. What would those grants be used for? Because I think I'm right in saying the temporary roof has been made good with another temporary roof. So is the next phase to include putting a permanent roof on there? And what else would the money be used for? And because we've got empty accommodation in the town area, everywhere you look, just across the road here, just have a look at the state of the old tax office with every window at the back of it broken. Nobody, because the whole system of working from the office, etc., seems to have gone forever. So originally we were looking at office accommodation there, but I presume that's been discounted.
Okay. This is within the third phase of development. The first phase, as you rightly said, was to put the original temporary roof on to make it watertight. The phase that we've just completed has made the building structurally sound. So all the unforeseens that we found, they've all been eliminated. A new temporary roof, but the next phase is going to actually complete the building. Now we're currently looking at what potential uses there are. We're still looking at potentially office accommodation because the building has so much history. The buildings of that nature normally attract a niche type of business, you know, especially from a design architectural practice type business. But we're also looking at the creative industries as well. So we're doing this in advance of the next funding stream. We haven't identified a single funding stream at the moment, but we've got one eye on the long-term investment for the long-term plan for towns.
Just to come in as well with a crumb of good news from a planner for once. But the flood modelling work that we've had done related to the Nant Molas predominantly to sort of look at what the actual flooding situation is in town centre. The findings of that modelling, which NRW have approved and will be reflected on their flood maps that are used for making planning decisions in the next month. We do now have a little bit more flexibility in terms of what could go in the YMCA, because previously, again, as ludicrous as it might sound for those who know the sort of topography of the area and the height of the building above sort of normal ground level, It was previously in, a part of it was in C2 flood zone, but that has been clarified now. So highly vulnerable uses could go in to YMCA without any issues from a planning policy flood perspective.
That's interesting. I mean, even in this day and age with climate change getting worse every day, if that building became flooded, we'd all be in trouble, all of us. Going back to the YMCA, so I presume, apart from looking at office, but a particular office user, they'd have to put a permanent roof in there rather than a temporary roof, because temporary roofs only last so long. How long do you think, because this is the other question residents around there and other members of the public are asking, well, that's been done, it's empty. I've told them there's a second phase. Obvious question is, well, how long will it be before that second phase starts? And how long will it take to finish?
I'd like to think we'll have an idea this year based on two things. Welsh Government haven't got any money at the moment, or a very reduced budget, because they're in the same position as local government. But the next general election is going to be decisive, because most of the money in the system is UK government EU replacement funds. So we'll know this year, when we see where the politics fall, where that funding source potentially is.
It's interesting, because obviously, as you say, if we then tapping into various UK funds, it's crucial what happens, I presume, later on this year.
Yeah,
So that in answer to the rest of my question, the time factor is dependent on what happens in the general election.
yeah, Cadw and HLF have got a significant interest and maintain a significant interest as well in the building, but obviously their funding alone won't do it.
Okay, thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Clive. Do we have a cost on what? You know, I think it was a cost a couple of years ago, but do you know what it would be to put it right now?
Probably 5-6 million.
Yeah, I think the final phase is going to be, as Alan said, the permanent roof, the terracotta on the external of the building, and the internal fit out. But the architect has said that he's de-risked all the building. We found all the unforeseens in this phase, which were a lot, hence the time scale slip. But yeah, I think when we go to tender and get that cost, hopefully that is going to be the cost that we're looking at. And we'll fundraise to meet that value then.
Thank you. Anna, do you want to come in?
Thank you. Sorry, just to pick up on the point Craig made about the flood risk. So at this stage, that potentially means it could be an element of housing. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Clive, you've got it later.
Yes, I forgot to ask, how much did the first phase cost us? Because that was a few million, wasn't it?
Sorry, when you say first phase, you've
All the work's been done up until.
Oh, right, okay. I don't know. I'd have to check. Can I email committee afterwards?
Yeah.
Because I've got more of an idea of the cost of this phase, but I'd have to review what the previous phase was. So I'm happy to do that following the meeting.
I'm telling residents around the right figure.
Yeah, no problem.
Yes, thanks.
Thank you. No more questions for YMCA. Speaking to myself, but we've got the miners' hall. Clive.
Oh God. When I first got elected, it was in the town board. And guess what? We were a shadow authority for the first year. And then from April onwards, the questions came in. And what was top of the agenda? the state of the miners hall. Residents around there, I've no doubt, Councillor Thomas and the other three are also getting the similar questions about it. From a guess, I think it's been completely empty because it's been burnt down twice, or the fire's there twice. Been empty about 35 years. Must be. It's happened on, it's definitely over 30 from my knowledge. And my first question is in relation to the owner of the building, because I don't think it's a top secret in naming names, but the Baverstock or whoever was the descendant of the Baverstock, are they still the same owners? And the last I heard, they were far away in sunny Scotland residing. And I picked up from the report, it says in here, I can't find the paragraph now. Oh yes, here it is. No further progress of the future redevelopment has been made in relation to the miners' hall since the VVP programme, as no contact has been made with the council from the private owner. Does that mean that he hasn't been, or he or she hasn't been in touch with the council? Shouldn't it be the other way about? Shouldn't we be calling in this owner? I know they live a long way away, but they've got a responsibility, like the other builders we talked about. They got a responsibility for this building. And when I chaired one of the scrutiny committees that covered similar things like this years ago, I pressed the officers because the front gates were open to the elements. And as a result of that, and there was concern at the time with, I don't know what you call them, but if you look at the building, look to the left, there were stones which looked unsafe there, and the residents around there were concerned about it. But as a result of that, we got the owner, or might have been the council did it, put a lock on the gates. So the problem is, it's still the private ownership. They've got a responsibility. The bushes in front have been cut back since Adam was a boy. And if they cut back those bushes, there must be somewhere in the region of about half a ton of cans, litter, bottles, and other things unmentionables that are hidden behind the bushes. So again, they've got a responsibility to engage somebody to trim back these bushes. I would suggest they trim right back and keep all the steps behind there, the front, and cleanse it on a regular basis. But I don't think that's been happening. So my number one question is, why haven't we called the owners of this building in? And quite honestly, Chair, I think we've got powers to call these people into this scrutiny committee to ask them pertinent questions. I don't think that's ever been done before, but I'm sure that the power lies there. So I really, let's be perfectly honest. There are buildings we mentioned, those and this one. If work was done on all those, including St. Hilda's Hospital, it would eradicate the main problems in the town centre area. But again, the Miners Hall seems to be the number one.
We haven't tried to make contact for an awful time now, Clive. It's the closest we ever got with the VVP program in partnership with Merthyr Housing Association. But it just, to be honest, we just ran out of time and the funding stream stopped. Happy to reinvigorate our contact with the family. We'll have a look to see where we left that. But there's absolutely no money and we've got no capacity to take a scheme forward there. That's the reality of the situation at the moment, but happy to chase the owner again.
Right. And in the meantime, as part of that conversation, because they have a responsibility, because they own the building and what's in curtilage and what's inside that, can you ask them to arrange for somebody to cut back these bushes and clean up the place so it looks, I know it is derelict because it's nothing behind the facade there, but that needs to be cleaned up. And and whoever does it, I don't know which department that would be in this case, but it needs to be done.
We take that as an action.
Okay, thank you.
I think there would be appetite, you know, and I don't think they'd probably say no. They'll probably say no about cleaning it up unless we charge them in default or whatever. But I think it'd probably be appetite for enough volunteers, as long as they gave permission to enter the land. If it was, I know it's probably maybe unsafe though, thinking about it.
Yes, I think that is a very good point. But I think, and I'm going back years when, and we've got a officer or officers to have a look at that because the stonework had moved. You know, there was a gap in it. So if you order to say yes and you're able to get in there, I think it needs with a caveat that it is safe for people to be working there. Because I would have a little bit of a doubt of going in there if I don't think there's any work being done on it.
And it must be over 35 years. I'm 53 now. No, less than 35. And I remember going there when it was Charbonnier. So obviously I wouldn't have gone in there under 18, obviously. So yeah. Yeah. Right. Okay. Any other questions on the miners hall? Like Clive said, as I know it's a comment, but I would love to see the bud layer and it all cleaned out of there and just make it look a little bit tidy as you come up Church Street.
Can we ask, because obviously Alan Owen has said that they will make contact with the owner and that they will try and pursue the cleaning of the place up there. Can the committee have an email or report back as to what happened if it was a big no and he's still ignoring us? I think we need to know.
Thanks, Al. Anna, do you want to come in?
Thanks. I just wanted to pick up on that because I mean, you know, appreciate the intentions, but then I think we've opened up a wider conversation about the failure of private ownership then to adhere to their responsibilities. You know, and these rules are there. But then thinking of these buildings we've discussed so far, is there anything in future we could do, for example, when looking at the local development plan, to make sure our policies are robust enough to avoid these issues reoccurring or happening to a building in future?
I think the difficulty we have from the planning point of view is that we can't force people to actually develop. We can facilitate that development through a policy framework and through the allocation of sites. And again, General Hospital is allocated, St Tidwell's Hospital is allocated, the Miners Hall is allocated for residential development. So to a point, we're doing as much as we can from that sort of planning policy perspective. Now, whether someone comes forward with schemes that are eventually turn out to be unviable, that's we can sort of consider that at an application stage. But again, it's I think it just highlights again, sort of all these buildings highlight how difficult it is to bring these buildings back into use once they become vacant for a certain period of time. And I think that time from becoming vacant to the condition deteriorating, that it does impact on the viability to bring back to use isn't as long as people think.
Thank you.
Okay. I don't think there's any more questions on the miners hall. I haven't got any more significant buildings in here. Before I leave and Anna can ask a question, is there any other questions on the report?
Well, I had two generic ones. Do you want me to do those now? Or?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. With regards to where we want to be, could you provide an update on the makeup of the Towns Board and progress there, please?
Yeah, so as part of the long-term plans for town programme, we needed to establish a board by the end of March. So I think I updated committee at the last meeting that we'd established a core board at that point. So that consisted of many of the original members of our town centre partnership. So our existing chair, Paul Gray from Tidwell Training, transferred across as our chair of the board. There was a requirement of UK government that we had both the MP and a representative from the police on the board also, and a minimum of 2 elected members. So we've met all of those criteria through Gerald Jones MP, currently the Chief Superintendent from South Wales Police Business Crime Unit, and the leader and deputy leader from the authority. And then we also, as our core board, had the manager from the BID, chief executive from Voluntary Action Merthyr Tydfil, Merthyr Tydfil Housing Association, and Mentor Iaith Merthyr Tydfil. Also then, as part of the core board, we had advisors to the board. It was recommended through UK government that any of the local authority officers would sit as advisors as opposed to board members, because board members have voting rights and we are there to help advise, guide and support the programme delivery. So obviously this is being led completely by the board itself. So there are a number of officers from the authority that sit on the board as advisors as well. Since that point, we're now working towards our full board membership. So we've also now appointed, or the board have also now appointed, the vice chair from Merthyr Tydfil Rugby Club, one of the managers from the Merthyr Town Football Club, and also Dawn Bowden MS as a member of the Senate for the board as well. And we've another appointment yet to be made, and that should be finalised shortly. So that will complete our board. We've shared all that information with UK government, and they're happy with the creation of the board as well now.
Thank you. And
Sorry, and 2 secs. Just an update. We met yesterday with me, Neil, and Alan, and Paul met yesterday. We've planned for the forward work programme a skeleton and long-term plan for towns will come in October as well. So a report will come then.
okay. Thanks. And I just wanted to ask a general question. Looking at the information provided on Castle House, and also the progress made on the Howfields building, sorry. Those have both been purchased and developed by RWP Properties. And researching that company, it looks like they're undertaking similar type of work in other local authorities as well. So I just wanted to understand the relationship the council has with that company at the moment, and whether they are purchasing these buildings and then approaching the council, or whether it's the other way around and they are purchasing these properties with direction from the council. See what I mean?
So they are purchasing the property. So for example, with Howfields, they had acquired that property and approached us to look at any grant aid or loan and finance to support them redevelop that property. So as we were moving towards the completion of that building, they'd purchased Castle House, and again they'd approached us to look at how we could potentially support them with the redevelopment of that property. So when we go into the Transforming Towns programme, we do we undertake significant due diligence on the companies as well. So one of the questions the Welsh Government do ask within their application: what are the funding the developer has received, what are the projects they're working on, etc. And we'd also look at the success rate from a Merthyr basis as well. So from Howfields, obviously that was a success. They'd spent the loan and grant finance that they'd secured through Transforming Towns by the time we applied for funding for the Castle House. And again, we managed to get that funding secured and working with them and developing that property now.
That's great. Thank you.
If I can just add, obviously we work with a lot of private developers, but out of the recent developers we've worked with, they've been excellent. The quality of the work, the quality of their plans for the buildings, and the financial modelling has been really impressive.
Positive. Thank you.
Councillor Jones?
Two things. So there's one vacancy left on the this town's board from what you've just described, Zoe. And which part of the community is that seat to be allocated to?
We're looking at a member from the faith sector,
Right.
and that's something that's advised within the UK government guidance. So we're currently working through options for an appointment at this very moment.
I think that's good, because if you're covering a cross section, it should include those organisations as well. It's 10 million's allocated, £10 million over 20 years.
20 over 10.
Sorry? Oh, got it wrong. 20 million over 10 years. So I read somewhere that's going to be 2 million a year or thereabouts. So, and it's 50,000 setup costs. So the board's been set up and we'll be meeting, I presume, frequently. So when do you anticipate this large amount of money per year is going to start the spend next year, I presume?
So by the 1st of April, we need, 1st of August, we need to submit our 3-year plan.
Right.
And within some recent guidance that's been issued, they're looking at an allocation per year, which would be approximately around 2 million, split between capital and revenue. We are awaiting further guidance from UK government, which may give more clarity moving forward. But in the first instance, we are due to submit a 10-year vision, but a 3-year plan. So the work for the board over the next 2.5 months will be to focus on what our key priorities are for the next 3 years. Right. And should that plan be approved and submitted, that funding will be released on an annual basis. Okay. There was a £50,000 allocation up front, which is known as capacity funding. Yeah. So we've been able to utilise that to support any of the requirements of the board, but also to undertake consultation, which is required to support the creation of the action plan. And also then, once we've satisfied UK government criteria around establishment of the board, establishment of a website or web page on our council website, etc. So we had a checklist that we need to meet the criteria within. They release a further £200,000 as well, which again is capacity funding for the board to use as they wish. But we're hoping to look at further resource, etc. through that then.
Right, thank you.
Am I right in saying that it's not 10 years now, it's 7 years? Is that right? So it's more than 2 million a year, but it's over 7 years. And Anna, is this, do I need to leave now, or is this yeah, I'll leave.
As a matter of interest, why do you need to leave?
It's advice. He wants to ask about
Redders.
All right, okay. All right, okay, all right, okay, sorry, I thought we were talking with building.
Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Anna Williams-Price.
Thank you. Just as obviously the Red House is so significant to the town centre, I thought it would be appropriate to raise this this afternoon. There was a recent statement from the council leader indicating that support from the council will be offered to both parties, that being Merthyr Tydfil Housing Association and Merthyr Tydfil Leisure Trust, in finding a solution for the Red House. Are you able to provide any more detail in what support the council can provide at this stage?
If I start with the Housing Association, we've been working with the Housing Association for quite a number of months, because obviously this has been a slow impact car crash. So what we've been able to agree with the Housing Association is that we would grant fund through the SPF program any shortfall in running costs for a 1-year period, on the proviso that the Housing Association would take it back. They'd employ the staff, and we'd use that 1-year period to support the Housing Association to look at the long-term sustainable business plan for the setup, because there's a couple of ways you can look at it going forward. There's the possibility of going out to the sector to see if there's a creative industries organisation who would be interested in taking the lease and taking the building forward. There's the potential of looking at local interest, because there's a lot of passion in the sector about the building, with the potential of forming some sort of cooperative model to take it forward. Or probably the third would be to work with the Housing Association to devise what new organisation could be set up, which was bespoke to taking the building forward. So that's the journey we've been on with the Housing Association. They went through the 2-piece process with the staff, as you're aware. They hadn't had the deed of undertaking signed by the association or the transfer of the buildings, but in that delayed period, they took further legal and financial advice, and due to the fact that all the staff had actually been placed in the local government pension scheme, they came with a financial liability with the pension, and the board then did not feel that they could be the staff with that liability. So that's why we find ourselves in the situation. But that support obviously is still in place, because what we'd anticipate a little bit further down the line, when the building reopens, then we'll discuss with the association moving back to that model. The board itself, we've had it's been very difficult process of trying to have any communication with them, but the support, well, what we've offered is for the board to tell us what support they want, which would have basically been supporting, perhaps seconding one of the previous staff back to them to actually close the organisation down. So we met with the board last week, but as at today, they haven't been able to indicate exactly what that support is. I'd be very surprised if they haven't by now approached an insolvency practitioner. So that might change the dynamics again.
Thank you. And this question relates to part of an ITV report which was aired, I think it was last night, on which the council leader appeared, which stated that the council is calling for an inquiry or investigation into the Leisure Trust. Could you confirm if this is accurate, as it's not an attributable quote, and what form would any investigation take?
We've had no internal discussions on that on that issue.
Thank you. Further to question regarding the Towns Board, which obviously we were advised had representation from the Housing Association. Do you think there's scope there for that to look at the Red House as a priority, being as it is important for the town centre? And could our council representatives raise this with the board?
Yes, it definitely can be a priority. We think we've covered the immediate potential financial package through SPF. But yes, on a longer term, that's something we will be looking at.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Anna Williams-Price. Any other members with questions on the Red House? Yeah, Councillor Clive Jones.
Yes. Can you confirm that the Merthyr Tydfil Leisure Trust legal representatives have now stopped representing them?
We haven't had any official confirmation of that, but that's what we understand.
Right. Number two, because I've spoken to at least one user of that building, they've immediately losing rental from certain organizations there, because with the abrupt closure announcement, I think on Friday evening, there are regular users there who are immediately looking around, seeking other venues, I think particularly within the town area. So they're losing money. So that leads me on to my last question. I completely understand where the officers are with this, because it seems as if it's the last dying days of the Merthyr Leisure Trust. When do you think this process will be concluded and the building reopened? Because Facebook went off into the stratosphere about this on Friday.
I don't rightly know. I'm not sure how any insolvency process might interact with the actual opening or closing the building. But from a pragmatic perspective, I would have thought that once the housing association take control of their building again, then they'll give the opportunity for business as usual.
So but I don't want to put any words into your mouth, Alan, but we may be talking, could be talking a few weeks.
Could be.
Right. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Clive Jones. Can I just ask if anyone else has got any questions on Red House before you bring the chair back in? Councillor Alan Williams-Price.
I wanted to make a comment, but for ease, it makes sense. I think it makes sense for me to do that before we bring me back. That's okay. And just touching upon the forward work plan, because as there's already been discussion at full council of this committee's role in scrutinising plans for leisure services moving forward, I think as a committee we should review whether there is merit in expanding this into a wider look at the Leisure Trust and the actions it's taken so far, and how we can avoid this happening with any future organisation.
Lovely. I think when I was the mayor, I asked for a full and open and honest, transparent, in-depth look at what happened to Leisure Trust once everything got back to normal, if it ever does, or a swimming pool opens. Okay, Councillor Lee Davis, if you'd like to come back in, I'll ring the bell.
I've said it now before, I was just pressing it randomly and then it was something the other half time. Seats nice and warm. Okay. Guys, I don't know if you're going to stay or do you want to leave? It's up to you. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for attending and answering all the questions. My favorite topic. I might. Okay. Moving on. Yeah, take care. Item agenda 5, scrutiny forward work programme. Myself, Neil, met with Alan and Paul Lewis yesterday to go through some topics. We've populated a skeleton forward work program. Circulate that tomorrow. Tomorrow? Yeah, tomorrow. If we put some dates in the diary for the next, I'm conscious the week after is half term. So if we put some dates in next week, maybe early the following week after half term, and then just come back to us, and then we can meet up, either meet in person or meet in teams to discuss what we want to see in the forward work program. How does that sound, Clive?
Sounds like a plan to me, Chair.
Yeah.
Have we got anything readily identifiable to go on the agenda for the next? And
Yeah, the next meeting is not till July the 9th, I believe.
all right.
And there's one thing on there, I think.
Pilot project he did.
Oh yeah, it's the they did a pilot environmental project in Galanacha with MVH regarding the rats in that
Oh,
area.
right.
So that is the findings of that
Right.
pilot.
Very good.
Yeah, so just look to populate it a little bit more. Anna?
So, yeah, happy to meet next week, and I just wanted you to raise now, if that's okay, as it sort of arose as part of an WLG training session on scrutiny that I attended, about how we can further seek input from the public on our forward work plan.
Okay.
And investigate perhaps whether there could be any support from the comms team on, once that plan is finalised by us, going out to the public and
Yeah.
seeing if that's aligned with their priorities, or also encourage any suggestions of where there might need to be amendments.
Yeah, happy to do that. I'm always happy to involve the public and co-produce stuff. Clive?
So, sorry, did you say next week you wanted this meeting?
Yeah, well, it could be next week. It's the week or early the week after half term or during half term. It makes no difference to me.
Personally, I would prefer the week after half term.
Okay,
I got a few things on next week, and
okay.
it's not going to be Friday, is it?
No, I don't expect it is.
But the following week, if we, the
Yeah.
book's in a date there somewhere.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, that's no
Okay.
problem.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Comments? No? Okay. Moving on, agenda item 6, scrutiny referrals. I don't have any.
Oh.
Item agenda 7. Oh, Clive, do you want to come in there?
Sorry, perhaps I missed the boat, but did we deal with comments to do with the buildings before? When you were here before?
No, I think it's just Anna.
Yeah, sorry.
Unless he was all out.
Right.
Sorry, I wasn't here.
We've shut that door, eh? Right.
Well, yeah, I guess you could
Yeah.
you can bring it up in next agenda item, report recommendations regarding today's meeting.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
What I wanted to say is that we've given this a good area with particular buildings that are a real problem, particularly the town centre. But my view, for what it's worth, is that there should be a priority given for, for example, the Old General Hospital, the Theatre Royal, the Miners' Hall. I would place those probably in the top 3, because once we've cracked those 3, and the public can see that for once we are hoping to really start dealing with these. And clearly in my book, I would hope that the top priority would be what we're going to do with the Old General Hospital.
Yeah, well, I think that's probably more likely to do, for that and St. Tidvilles, that they're more likely to be done than the other 2, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Looks as if there's some progress with that. Yeah. There seems to be some light at the end of the tunnel, but these other 3 are a real long-term problem. And I understand what they're saying about, the finance is not there. but I think we need to have a priority list from the officers in the case of those three as to what is they feel is going to be the priority.
Yeah, I do struggle with this flood zone.
Oh, it's absolute nonsense, man.
Yeah,
Absolute nonsense.
you know, the Theatre Royal is surrounded by houses that are even lower than that one. So I am gobsmacked. Rather than let something get knocked down or be derelict, surely developing that.
There's never been any flooding ever in my memory with the Mollers at all, ever.
Yeah, it is a strange one. You know, some parts of the town centre are under flood zone, and you know, it need 6 months of rain, and they still wouldn't get any near it. I wouldn't have thought, but okay. Yeah, I think we give it a good hearing, as Clive said. I thought there was some really good questions, and we got some good answers. In terms of yeah, well, in terms of a way forward anyway, and hopefully in our term in office, it might be nice to see at least one of them progressing forward. Okay, item agenda 8, feedback on scrutiny activities. Dec, do you want to give on a task and finish group?
Oh, it's consumed my life, to be honest. It's a quick update. It's 66 pages so far. Probably another 5-10 pages. I've got to stop it now, to be honest. I've got a meeting next Wednesday with a representative of Dŵr Cymru Welsh Water in Denbighshire, from Denbighshire, because he says that he's got some lots of ideas. So waiting 6 questions from Natural Resources Wales as well, and I've got to call it quits then. To be honest, I think it needs. Some members have seen versions of it and that sort of thing, but I think we need to see now. It needs to be presented to or given to members to look at, for them to make comments as well and recommendations, because sometimes, as I said, 66 pages, probably another 10 maybe. Sometimes you can't see the wood from the trees, and I think it does need that input from others as well. I will say though, there has been, since it started and since we started pushing it and that sort of thing, I have seen changes within the local authority as well. I can't go into it at the moment, but by the time you see the report, and probably maybe next week, there should be some good news in that as well.
I will say that Declan's done 98% of this work, and it's been a lot of work. His emails of back and forth consistently, and lots of answers. So how do you want to play it? Do you want to circulate it to us, and then we come back not at scrutiny to discuss it, and then we plan whether we do a joint scrutiny or we just bring it to this scrutiny?
I'd like to knock it on the head on next Wednesday after the meeting with Dŵr Cymru Welsh Water, to be honest. Yeah. And then I put all their stuff together that afternoon. It'll be ready for 5-6 o'clock. So if the chair is happy for to send it out then to the members, then
should we do that?
Yeah. And I don't know then if I know Paul Lewis wanted to do
a workshop.
I don't know how that fits into it, to be honest.
Well, I understand that you've been talking to some fairly senior officers, but this is a thorny subject that once and for all needs to be cracked, and obviously it has taken something like Declan to devote enormous amount of hours of time and research and talking to people to put this together. And I'm sure on this occasion, once this comes out to whichever domain is going to go, that things will begin to start moving. I think perhaps we might need to have a look at it as a full committee with the relevant officers here. But obviously this is the thorny subject is not just the members of this committee, and the issue also involves another scrutiny committee, but all the elected members are affected by this and have been for years and years. So I'm just wondering whether we have a crack at it here, and then it can be determined if that's going to be widened then to a workshop or wherever it's going to go.
I think that's a decent way forward. Yeah. Okay.
Could go on the first, on July
Yeah.
the 9th.
Yeah. Potentially, yeah. Well, it'd probably fit in with, you know, into July the 9th. Yeah, it would be fitting with, you know, obviously the environmental fly tipping that's, you know, that's gone on in Galnacha. So yeah, okay. Let's do that. Item agenda 9, any other business deemed urgent by the chair? I have none. Like to bring a meeting to the close, and sorry, Olivia, for being here so long. Do apologise. Thanks, guys.